Hi, my name is Nicole. I'm here at the Pearl Review, my new YouTube channel. I'm doing a series on classics and personal favorites for people who are considering reading these books and just going over why I think these books are special. So today I'd like to talk about Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon. I read this book because I wanted to get into Toni Morrison, but I was a little afraid to take on Beloved because I knew that there were some heartbreaking and disturbing elements to that book, and I just didn't feel ready yet. So I wound up reading this, and it became one of my favorite books of all time. This book is about Milkman Dead, who is a young black man who lives in a large black community, and it's set during the 1930s through the very early 1960s. And it's an interesting choice because I think that there's like a parallel between the main character's development and also the progression of events that are happening with the black community that's included in the book. There's these historical events that are included that are the seeds of change that help start the civil rights movement. The book is not set during the movement, but shows a little bit of the progression of the community beforehand. Now, the main character, Milkman, is this like listless, superficial, spoiled kid at the beginning of this book, and he has this reckoning with his family and his roots and is transformed in this book. And a lot of that is to do with a reunion he has with his aunt. She is the sister of his father. His father is a prestigious member of his community, and his aunt is a bootlegger. And so he's estranged from her, and she helps him reclaim his identity and also helps him unravel the mystery of his grandfather's murder. So if relying on that plot alone, relying on the story of him going back to the site where all of these things happen and try and undo the past, that would be a great read in and of itself. But where Toni Morrison really sold me on this novel actually was her beautiful use of language, of imagery, and of the inclusion of fantastical elements that only make this book stronger. So in this novel, one of the major themes is flight, and that is one of the fantastical elements in the book. And Milkman is obsessed with flight, and I think this was a brilliant choice on Morrison's part because I think there's a duality in that flight can represent escape, but it can also represent empowerment. Morrison was inspired to use this because of an old African American folk tale, and that was of the African slave returning home. Another fantastical element that was used in the novel was the character Pilate, Milkman's aunt. She actually has a duality going on too. She is both like warm and loving and feminine and authentic, but on the other hand, she's also sinister and scary and enigmatic and misunderstood. And I think by far she is the most interesting character of the novel. I think that this novel uses these elements so well. It reminds me of other books that are described as magical realism novels. Although Morrison bristled at her book being linked with these other books, she said that she used elements of African American folklore and Christian mythology. Like the title of the book actually is a chapter of the Old Testament, and she's kind of doing her own thing. However, I think it does help to understand this book if we do define magical realism, since it's so similar. Magical realism is when a story that's mainly based in reality has these moments of fantasy in them. So it's not a straight realistic novel, and it's not fantasy either. It's something in between. And I think that she uses this so well because I think the subject matter is spooky. You know, I think that Milkman looks for ghosts and he finds them. This book really reminded me of 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, in that both of them are greatly about family and trauma and fantasy. And after reading both of them, I kind of came away thinking that maybe fantasy is a way of processing trauma in art. So this book gave me a lot to think about. There's a lot more to it than I've even described. And so there's a lot of room also for interpretation. I do think that Toni Morrison is one of our greatest living authors. And this is a fantastic novel to read and to not be missed. People who have read 100 Years of Solitude and have enjoyed that, I would definitely recommend that. I also do want to include a piece of trivia actually between the two authors. They actually were friends. I have a picture of them meeting, and in the article that I read where I found this, Marquez actually invited Morrison to his birthday party. And that's kind of a major feat because Toni Morrison lives in the United States and he lives in Colombia, so it's really, really cute that he did that. Anyway, if you have read this book or other Toni Morrison books, or have thoughts about how those two books are linked, please comment below, and thank you so much for listening.